thanks again, Bill and Bill, for coming. I'm super excited about this opportunity and excited to hear what you guys have going on. We've got a brilliant group here of lots of very innovative and bright individuals from all spectrums, from I see farmers, people in genetics and seeds, biofuels. Thank you, Ahmed, for joining. Textiles guy, I see your face. Thank you very much for joining. Yeah, so from seed to cradle and everything in between. Okay, so anyway, thank you guys very, very much for joining. I really appreciate everybody coming. I'm excited that we have this opportunity. I don't know how we got so lucky. Bill, I appreciate Bill Ashton, Mr. Ashton, I appreciate your relationship and your involvement here and being willing to open the doors and invite Mr. Richmond. For anybody that is new to the platform, we host 8 to 12 of these a month, typically around 10 now. I think I've gotten it a little bit under control. They're in all different categories, from farm, biofuels, construction materials, plastics, textiles, farm and farm, grain and fiber, seed, and so forth. There's an education series just like this one that runs every Thursday. The link that you have is a reoccurring link. There will be a time here soon where we're going to cut back on this one specific, just because now we've created these subgroups that we're going to continue to feed into. In August, middle of August, we are launching a platform that allows us to bring other associations together and other groups, distribute content, get more people involved. And so I'm really excited about this. It's a learning management software, event management, as well as membership management. And it allows us to create subcommittees and working groups within this platform. And so, and then in addition, it allows us to build a visual map of who is who with pins that become searchable also. And so I'm really excited to launch that and kind of show you as we finish developing that and getting that built out. So just a reminder that we are a membership-based group. Thank you very, very much for those of you that are members. Ahmed, Rich, Les, Jeremy, Drew, thank you very, very much. I can just see you guys, Bob, on my front screen, Michelle. For any of you that have questions about joining membership, don't hesitate to holler at me. I love talking about it. I love connecting and help building relationships. And more importantly, helping highlight those that are doing it right. And so if you or anybody else is interested in getting up on our panel or joining me for a Q&A or a live interview, please reach out, and I'd love to connect you. Both Michelle is a fabulous member support that we have, and great at connecting as well. So you can reach out to either of us. With that being said, I'd like to hand it over to either Bill, either one of you, I guess. Bill Ashton, if you want to start and kind of give an intro about what you do and what your role is, and then we'll hand it over to Bill Richmond and go from there. Thank you very much.
Sounds great, Mandi, and thank you very much for inviting us, and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Bill Ashton, and just so everyone knows, I threw my email address into the chat room, so if you have any questions after this, you can always send them to me there. I was hired at USDA 3 years ago, and as the Military Veteran Agriculture Liaison. You can tell from my accent that I am from the South, place south of Boston. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's called New York. And if we were all together, you would find that my fingernails are clean and my hands are soft. So what's the bottom line? I'm not a farmer. I have learned so much in the 3 years that I have been at USDA, and what I feel my role is in USDA is to educate veterans on what USDA has to offer veterans, whether they're transitioning out of the military or in fact they've been out of the military for 5 to 10 years. And so myself and another colleague of mine who's down in Florida, we work on 3 pillars. And those pillars are employment, education, and entrepreneurship. And I'll kind of give a quick run through on what each one of them do. In the employment section, I am very proud to say, and I won't take all the credit. My colleague is not on the line, so, well, heck, I'll take the credit then. He's not here. But that being said, in FY18, USDA across the enterprise, and you all probably know that we pretty much have an office in every county in the United States. I mean, we touch everyone. But in FY 2018, we hired 1,782 veterans in USDA. In FY19, we hired 1,944. And in FY20, we hired 2,284. And this is just within USDA. So that kind of gives you an idea of the hiring. Now, the one thing that gets people when I'm talking to them about hiring is everybody thinks the Department of Agriculture is all about farming. And if you were to look on the website of OPM and look at what series we hire to at USDA, you will find that there's almost 290 different series. Yes, a lot of them have to do with agriculture and things like that, but we have economic research. My colleague, Bill Richmond, is at the Agriculture Marketing Service. We have, as some of you may know, we are a bank at USDA. A lot of people don't realize that. We actually lend money. We actually guarantee loans. And so when you talk about lending money, well, what would you think? You need people with financial background. So we hire people with financial background. So it's not a thing of that you have to be into farming. When we talk about loans and everything like that, a lot of people, again, we talk about loans for farms, obviously, and guaranteed loans for farms. And we also, a lot of people are not familiar with it, but in rural development, which happens to be one of the biggest tasks we have at USDA, is to help develop rural America. A lot of people don't realize that we actually have loans for homes and guaranteed loans for homes. Now, it's not any home, obviously. It has to be in a designated rural area. And there are some stipulations to qualify for a loan for us, both with the Farm Service Agency and with the rural development. So one of the two things I would say that I want to make sure everyone knows. One is, if you want to know the honest to God truth, where the rubber meets the road, I highly recommend you go to the local office in your area. And if you want to find that, you can go to farmers.gov, and in the top right-hand corner, it says connect, and you can enter your state and your county, and it will tell you where your local office is. I say that because sometimes people have a tendency to listen to this guy, Bill Ashton, in Washington, D.C., who, as most of you know, in Washington, D.C., we live in utopia. Everything is perfect in our world here. So I don't want anybody walking into one of the local offices and saying, well, I listened to this guy, Bill Ashton, on a meeting with the Global Health Association, and he said, no, don't work. Not today. But let me just give you some idea. In FY20, and this is strictly veterans that I'm talking about. In FY20, USDA's Rural Development Single Family Housing Loan Program assisted 1,312 veterans, and we obligated $180,853,000 grants and loans strictly to veterans. And we also have in rural development a program called the Rural Business Loan Program, and we assisted 65 veterans, and we obligated $46,460,000. So USDA is very interested in our veterans. We have a commitment to serve those who have served us. So that's just some of the things there. I could go through every one of the agencies, and it really depends on who you talk to at USDA. I like to say we have 10 agencies under the umbrella of USDA. You could talk to someone else and they'll tell you, no, there's 15 of them. But needless to say, USDA is a rather large organization. And again, we're pretty much in every county throughout the United States. Another area that we have helped with financial assistance under the NRCS, the National Resource and Conservation Group, we actually, I'm just trying to see the numbers here real quick. Bear with me, I'm looking at slides at the same time. But so there's a number. One of the things I always tell people is, the questions I get all the time is, okay, everything sounds so good, what you're telling us and everything like that, but what do you do specifically for veterans? And I say, nothing. And then they look at me like, well, why are you even here? Well, the truth of the matter is veterans are eligible for all of USDA programs. Are there some programs for people who are interested in getting into farming? The answer is yes. We have what's called the Ag Vets. That is a grant by the National Institute of Food, NIFA, which is part of USDA. And that is a program for farms, educational institutions that want to teach farming to our veterans, and it is only open to veterans and their dependents. We also have what's called the 2501 program, and that is a program for grants that allow for teaching socially disadvantaged and veterans. So I just want you to know that there are actual programs out there to help veterans get into farming. Before I get to the NRCS, I just wanted to give you an idea of the Farm Service Agency and the loans and guaranteed loans that we did in FY18. Direct loans, this was strictly to veterans again. There was 1,028 of them that we helped, and it came out to be 42.8 million. In guaranteed loans, the number of veterans that were helped was 1,476. And the amount that we guaranteed was $234.4 million. And so jumping up to fiscal year 20, we had direct loans of 1,041, and that was $119 million in direct loans. And in guaranteed loans, it was $302 million. Now, you asked the question of, well, why is there a difference between getting a loan from you or getting a guaranteed loan? So I try to make it clear to everyone. If you go into one of our offices, and this kind of goes for the rural development also, there are stipulations. If you walk into the Farm Service Agency, they're probably going to ask you to give them some information about your financial profile. If they believe that you could qualify for a commercial loan, they will refer you to a commercial bank. And that's where the guarantee loan comes in. Now, what I tell people is, veterans or transition service members don't wake up one day and say, oh, I think I'm going to be a farmer today. And they think they can come into the Farm Service Agency and get a loan. If you get a loan from us, there's stipulations, and it takes about 2 years to fulfill all the requirements just to get a loan from us. I don't want anybody to think that you're going to wake up and run over to the Farm Service Agency and get a loan right away. And I think that was, okay. So I wanted to talk real quick about National Resource and Conservation Services, which is EQIP. And that's an environmental quality incentives program that we have. And just in FY20, we helped 3,741 veterans in the amount of $25.5 million. So that's kind of an overview of at least the employment kind of give you an idea. You know, farmers are entrepreneurs, but once again, one of our largest tasks is to develop rural America. So when I talk about the business and industry loans, we're talking about being in rural America and maybe starting a bakery or a gym or something like that. So we really cover a wide variety of areas. One that really sticks out to me and is I was in a rural development office in Richmond, Virginia, and there was a woman there, and they were kind of giving me a brief when I first came on board, and she had a fire truck on her, one of those little matchbox on her desk, and I said, "Oh goodness!" I said, "Is that maybe your grandson gave that to you?" She said, "No, the local fire department gave it to me," and I said, "Gee, well, you a volunteer with them?" And she said, "No, we processed their loan. We actually give loans for fire departments, police departments, libraries, healthcare, community centers in rural areas." So if anything you get out of today from me, it may be an education of what all USDA really does. And obviously, the other pillar is education. We actually have scholarships to our 1890 universities, historically Black universities and colleges, 1994s, which are our tribal universities. So there is always that opportunity for people when people are transitioning out of military and they have turned over their post 9/11 GI Bill to their kids and they want to get into farming and actually go through a college. I will say one thing, it is very competitive to get these scholarships, but I want you to know that they're available. So with that, that's kind of an overview of what I do in the Military Veteran Agricultural Liaison, and I'll turn it over now to my colleague, Bill Richmond, who's with the Agriculture Marketing Service, and he's really the guy I know you really all want to talk to because he's like he's the hemp expert in USDA. So Bill, it's over to you.
Definitely not the expert. I appreciate that, Bill, and I appreciate the invite. Mandi, it's good to see some familiar names and some familiar faces out there. I know we had a lot of questions submitted on a whole wide range of topics, but what I was thinking we would do is just do a quick little introduction of the hemp program at USDA and spend a few minutes talking about the final rule that was issued earlier this year. We'll cover some of the big picture differences between the interim final rule, the final rule. We'll talk about what's going on here for the next 6 months or so with the program and a little talk about the state of the industry, and then we can jump right into questions, okay? So just real quick, the hemp program at USDA Warehouse and the Agricultural Marketing Service. So we are not a law enforcement agency. We're very much a marketing agency. We house all types of programs. We have about 5,000 or so employees across the country. We oversee programs like the National Organic Program. We oversee a wide range of inspection and grading programs. So when you go buy a dozen eggs or a pound of butter and you see that AA grade seal on the side of the product, that's our inspectors and our graders out there in those types of facilities. We oversee checkoff programs, otherwise known as research and promotion programs, like the Touch the Feel of Cotton, Incredible Edible Egg, Got Milk. Those types of programs are all overseen by our group. The reason I try to point that out is just for explaining that's the choice that Congress made when deciding where to house the hemp program in USDA. They could have put it over in a law enforcement agency or over in the FDA, but they decided to stick it with us, thankfully. So I'm the chief of the program. In the agency, we have about 10 full-time staff right now working throughout the country. Our primary role is to oversee state hemp programs, to oversee tribal programs, because a state can choose to administer their own program. A tribe can also choose to administer their own program. And if a state or tribe doesn't want to administer their own hemp production program, they can turn the licensing and oversight responsibilities over to us with our group. So we oversee 3 states currently, Mississippi, New Hampshire, and Hawaii. So we act as the same way a state Department of Agriculture or a tribal Department of Agriculture would, and interacting with growers. So following the passage of the 2018 Farm Bill, which is what formally decoupled hemp from marijuana and charged USDA with developing a hemp program, we entered into a period of rulemaking, basically setting up the framework for national rules around hemp growing. This involved issuing an interim set of rules several years ago, asking for public comment, public input, which I know a lot of folks on this call spent significant time and resources sending us input and insight as part of that comment process, and we appreciate it so much. The culmination of that lengthy several-year rulemaking process was the publication of a final rule back in January of this year. It just became effective in March. And long story short, without getting into too many details, we think that the final rule was significantly more flexible than the first set of requirements we had out on an interim basis. And I want to talk through some of the flexibilities that were included in that final rule document. So the first one is that in the final rule, we had some pretty specific requirements around the time period between when hemp is sampled for to be sent to a testing laboratory and when harvest can occur. We had a incredibly tough deadline in there that said that a grower had to complete harvest within 15 days after that sample being collected. We've received significant feedback on that around the burden that creates for a lot of our state and tribal regulatory partners, along with our growers, trying to meet that tight deadline. So the first thing that we changed in the final rule was doubling that deadline out from 15 days to 30 days. We know that the longer hemp stays in the ground, the higher the THC becomes. And so we try really hard to make sure that the test result from when the sample is taken aligns with the actual THC percentage of plants in the ground. And so we felt comfortable with bumping that harvest window out from 15 to 30 days. The next big change in the final rule has to do with a term known as negligence. Basically, in the hemp regulations, there are several different tiers of violations that a grower can receive as part of being a licensed hemp producer. And one of these has to do with what happens when they grow cannabis with THC greater than 0.3%. In the interim final rule, we said that if they grew hemp with THC greater than 0.5%, it was considered a negligent violation and could be used as a factor for a potential license suspension or a license revocation. We also doubled this threshold in the final rule from 0.5% THC up to 1.0%. We also clarified that a grower can only receive one negligent violation per year. Under the interim final rule, we said that if a grower received 3 negligent violations, they automatically lost their license for a period of up to 5 years. We found that to be incredibly harsh based on the comments we received. So we said now that a grower can only receive one negligent violation per year, regardless of how many specific instances of high tests or other categories of negligent violations that they commit. So a lot more flexibility there. I think just generally speaking, the overarching theme of the final rule, like I said before, was really around increased flexibility. We understand fully how difficult it is to grow compliant hemp with less than 0.3% THC, especially with the landscape out there with new and beginning growers, many of whom have never grown any kind of agricultural commodity in the past. And so we tried really hard to make the rules a lot more easier to follow. So folks have guardrails in place and give in the regulations to allow them to learn how to grow compliant hemp, which we all know how difficult that can be. The next item I wanted to mention has to do with an allowance for remediation of hot hemp. What this allows for now is that if a grower receives a non-compliant test result back, so THC higher than 0.3%, they can now remediate crops on the farm. They have two options on how they can do that. They can shred the entire plant together, flower, stalk, stem, seeds, leaves, everything into a biomass type material, resample that shredded combined biomass, have it retested. Remember, the initial test is from a plant in the ground. It's not from a full plant sample. It's strictly from flower. So the second test actually includes stalk, stem, seeds, other plant material. If that test from that remediated biomass comes back within range with a THC concentration less than 0.3%, it can be sold and enter into the stream of commerce. The other option is that a grower can separate flower from stalk, stem, seeds if there are seeds and other plant material, destroy the flower, and attempt to sell the residual plant material. This is a significant departure from where we were at in the interim final rule, which was a hard requirement that said if you grew anything over 0.3, there was no option to remediate. You had to immediately destroy everything. The other big change there in the final rule has to do with disposal. If after working through the remediation steps, or if a grower elects to not pursue remediation because of expense, timing, lack of equipment, or what have you, in a disposal situation is afoot, the grower can dispose of crops on site using traditional farming equipment, mowers, bush hoggers, shredders. They can use plants for mulch or bedding. They can burn it. They do not have to involve law enforcement. They do not have to involve any kind of federal officials. So a lot more flexibility there from where we were at in the first round of rules. And the last topic I wanted to mention has to do with some of the sampling requirements that we changed. In the interim final rule, it said that if you're a hemp grower, regardless if you're growing for grain, fiber, immature plants like seedlings or clones or microgreens or salad greens, what have you, if you've been a compliant hemp grower under a state pilot program, you had to be sampled, you had to be tested, regardless of your operation and your history of compliance. In the final rule now, states and tribes have the ability to include performance-based sampling requirements in their state-level regulations, which provide for excluding certain categories of growers depending on certain factors. Some of those factors are things like if they use certified seed under a state program, if they've been able to grow compliant hemp in prior growing seasons. So they're experienced. They know what they're doing. They know which genetics to use. They understand how certain genetics are going to perform and behave at their specific growing sites. If they're growing for fiber or grain or for non-cannabinoid uses, the state can look at all those different types of factors and develop custom sampling and testing requirements that best meet the needs of their specific state program and their specific growers. It's not a blanket requirement that everybody's treated the same, regardless of what they're doing. So a lot more flexibility there. Again, we've started to receive a number of revised state and tribal hemp program plans since the final rule was published. I think we've approved 7 state plans as of today. We have all the state plans up on the website. So if you do want to take a look at maybe what this performance-based concept looks like in practice, or if you wanted to just take a look at everything else we have up on the website, I encourage you to do so. I'll share the link in the chat here before we leave. We have anything and everything on the program up on the site. Webinars talking about all these different types of things I just covered. All the state and tribal plan documents, all the regulatory documents like the interim rule, the final rule. We issued some guidance documents related to sampling, testing, remediation, disposal. We have all those materials up on there. I'll also share our email address. We have a general inbox. It's just farmbill.hemp@usda.gov, monitored in real time. Any questions about anything at all related to the USDA hemp program or just any hemp questions generally, we can try to get you an answer or at least connect you with the best contact that we know of. I'll also share my phone number there in the chat before we leave. And very, very happy to start to work through these questions. Maybe Mandi, if you wanted to help us get organized there and maybe
absolutely. Okay, here we go. Talking about carbon credits. What about carbon credits? Would you mind touching on what's in place, what systems are in place, or where we're at as far as the carbon credits?
I don't have a great answer.
That's okay.
I will tell you that the administration is incredibly focused on all kinds of environmental issues, and carbon is right there at the forefront of that. We do not have any specific hemp-related carbon programs at the moment. I'll tell you, there's some interesting conversations happening in the background, and I think given the administration's interest in reducing carbon and learning more ways about hemp, how hemp can act as a carbon sink, I think there'll be some incredibly interesting things coming out in the future, but I just can't speak to anything at this moment.
Awesome. Okay. Will there be an extension for the time period that farmers can apply for a license from the USDA this year?
So farmers can apply for a license from USDA at any time. In the interim final rule, we had a specific application window in there where they could only apply for certain months. We got rid of that. So if you're a grower in Mississippi, New Hampshire, or Hawaii, along with several Indian tribes, you can apply at any time. It's very straightforward, just an application, a background check. We usually turn them around within a day or two. It's straightforward.
Okay, awesome. And then looks like that someone asked that they would love to hear more about hemp production programs, different programs that we already have in place. What's available?
You said production?
Uh-huh.
So
No?
I'll give you a rundown of kind of where all the different types of programs we have related to hemp at USDA. So under our program, our primary focus is around licensing of USDA growers, oversight of state and tribal hemp programs. We also have some conservation grant programs available, as Bill touched on, over at NRCS. So these are grant programs for building hoop houses, for putting in innovative irrigation plans, cover cropping, strip cropping, all those types of conservation-related practices. Those are available to hemp growers. Over in our risk management agency, we have a whole suite of different risk management products available to hemp growers, along with insurance products offered through our farm service agency teams. And as Bill mentioned, the best way for growers to learn about those programs is to go into your county FSA office, visit with the folks in there. We have a hard requirement under our regulations that every licensed hemp grower in the U.S. report their land where they are growing hemp in person at a farm service agency office. For one reason, because we're required to provide that information to law enforcement, but also because we want these new and beginning veteran and other farmers to be very well familiar with the suite of different products that are out there. And that's the county offices are really designed to be a one-stop shop for folks to learn about everything that's available to them. The other program we have is through NIFA, it's our National Institute of Food and Agriculture. They are the funding vehicle for our land grant research institutions. So they're pumping a ton of money into all kinds of hemp-related projects right now, being done at schools, all kinds of work primarily around genetics and THC and understanding varietal variations and what to plant where, when, and how. And there's some minds on this call that I think are way more versed in that than I am. So all kinds of different programs that are out there.
Awesome. Can you expand on interstate transportation of hemp? As you know, that there have been problems with police, sheriffs, et cetera. Is there a suggested standard to describe crop source, et cetera?
Yes, that's a great question. We've really tried to explore that in the final rule. We got a lot of proposals, a lot of ideas about ways to include hard documentation requirements for hemp as it moves across the country to avoid seizures and unnecessary police involvement. After a long legal debate, it turns out we did not have jurisdiction to impose a broad requirement across the whole country. But what we did do is include some best practices for growers and other industry participants to follow when moving hemp, intra or interstate, and always include every bit of documentation available: grower licenses, COAs, test results, bills of lading, phone numbers of either yourself, the grower, the processor, the state regulatory contact, our contacts in our program, instructions to law enforcement if a seizure is made on who to call and what to do, going above and beyond, and including all documentation that you can think of with hemp as it moves over the road is always a good idea.
Okay. Kentucky has a KDA Kentucky's KDA has an in-process regulation that allows the transfer of materials between processors that is above 0.3% THC levels as long as the finished product is compliant. Does the USDA have similar program?
It's a good question. I should have said this at the very, very beginning because it's an important distinction. So USDA, we have oversight over growers and over hemp growing facilities. We have no oversight over processors or processing. And so once we know that hemp was grown within compliant range, past the test at the lab, that's when we step out of the way and are no longer involved. And so with any issues around, in product or in process product or, in extract or any of those issues, we're not involved. I will tell you, I know some of you on this call have heard our colleagues over at DEA, they are in active rulemaking right now around some of this in-process hemp extract, some of those issues, and they're still working through the rulemaking. So we'll wait to see where they come out on that. But USDA has nothing to do with processed products.
Okay, so I've got a question here. Have your other sister USDA agencies, RD, NRCS, FSA, et cetera, updated their regulations previously to keep them from being involved in hemp and kept them from being involved in hemp? Have all your sister USDA agencies, and Nick, I know that this was your question, if we need to clarify, have all of your sister USDA agencies, RD, NRCS, FSA, et cetera, updated their regs that previously kept them from being involved in hemp? Absolutely.
I'd say that, with a caveat, given just the number of human beings and physical offices involved across USDA, it's a massive workforce. We try very hard to make sure that we're aligned and that we're treating hemp growers, licensed hemp growers, the same way we would have somebody that's growing corn or beans or raising dairy cattle or whatever. And we say that all the time, hemp is corn. Hemp is corn. Think about it the same way we would with anything else. That said, there's certainly some growing pains as we roll out all these different types of grant programs, conservation programs, getting everybody to communicate the same way and to look through the same lens when working with the hemp industry is going to take a little bit of time, but we're trying hard.
Doing great. I'm excited. Like I said, this is part of it, education. How can we bridge this gap, right? Let me ask that really from both of you. What can we do as a community to help bridge this gap? And on behalf of the USDA, communicate the message that we need to the industry? What can we really do to support you guys in development of this as well?
I have an easy one. A lot of times, as I'm sure Bill hears with a lot of the questions that come in from folks interested in learning how to grow hemp, with dollar signs and stars in their eyes, help us make sure that folks know there's a lot of risk in growing hemp. It's not as easy as just throwing seeds in the ground and cutting them up and going to the bank. Have a buyer, understand genetics. Understand the reporting requirements, understand what total THC is, understand testing requirements. So just helping us spread the word of caution and the compliance requirements around this commodity so folks don't get in over their heads is a big one.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree with what Bill was saying, because when I talk to people who are transitioning out of the military, you'll hear people say, well, I'm going back home and I've been buying a 100-acre farm. I said, well, do you have the money to run it? And by the way, have you talked to your family about it? Because we find in a lot of home ownership, somebody is actually working outside of the farm to help with financing. So, it's not a bad idea to start with something like 2 to 3 acres. Again, I don't know a lot about hemp, but when I start talking about small farms, 3 to 5 acres, maybe growing tomatoes or things like that, and using the farmers market. AMS has programs for farmers market and things like that. So it doesn't have to be, I think what Bill was saying is somebody get into this, and, obviously hemp is all new to all of us, exactly how it is and the measurement of it. And somebody will say, well, I heard Bill Richmond talk about this, and you can go into a state that we are not responsible. The state is the one giving the licensing. So, when you're talking to these people, you have to let them know that, again, the best place to go to get the information you need, because that's going to be who you're dealing with, is our local office in the area you're at.
Great advice. What projections do you guys see, or what projections do you see, Bill? Mr. Richmond, I'm not sure how to refer Bill 1 and 2. Projections for the development of industrial hemp in the next 6, 12, 24, 36 months.
Sure. I think as everyone on this call is well aware, we're in an incredible inventory situation right now. Biomass and crude, we're sitting on a lot of it. And so the key in thinking about the inventories out there and the depressed pricing situation we're seeing for biomass and for oils and other products is thinking about what the next step is beyond cannabinoid extraction. So thinking about how to find profitability in grain and in fiber. And there are folks on this call that are at they're the clear leaders in trying to figure that out for growers right now. And that's where we're engaged. That's where our thinking is, I think, for the next going out 12, 18 months, as we get past the cannabinoid conversations, thinking about what the next steps are to have a sustainable, long-term, viable market for growers across the country.
Awesome. So that kind of leads us to this other question that Mary had, wondering or questioning what other important parameters are tested besides THC and cannabinoids? Or are there any other tests?
So under our program is entirely about THC. And so it's total Delta 9 THC. Outside of that, there's all types of test results that may show up on different levels of COAs, whether it be for other cannabinoids, terpenes, pesticides, what have you. But for our program, it's strictly focused on THC.
Okay, so I don't know where you stand or if this is a conversation we can bring up or talk about, but of course the topic of Delta 8, where does the organization stand there, and where do you assume the next steps are for the industry?
Sure. I'll tell you that our regulation does not speak to Delta 8. We devoted a little bit of real estate to it in the final rule, and we basically landed at the approach that since Delta 8 is so naturally occurring, Delta 8 in hemp is so minuscule that we could not impose a restriction on Delta 8 THC because we are concerned with the plant and the plant only. On top of that, we look to the statutory requirements and the hard line restrictions, specifically mentioning Delta 9. I will tell you that DEA is taking a little bit of a different approach. And as I mentioned, they are in rulemaking right now around the Delta 8 issue and some of the other issues. I have no idea where they're going to come out. I'm sure, I know some of you have heard some representatives from Delta or from DEA speak to the Delta 8 issue here in recent months, and they will tell you that they are interested in supporting the hemp industry and working with the hemp industry. They understand the difficulties around growing compliant hemp, and they want to make it as accommodating and as flexible as they can. They've come out, they've said that publicly many times. Where they land on the final regulations, we'll have to wait and see. But for us at USDA, we're not concerned with Delta 8.
Can you guys speak a little bit to, there was an article just released that spoke a lot about the opportunities for veterans and or other people that had maybe previously been charged with a marijuana charge, non-criminal, but with now being eligible for lending or loans and various opportunities. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I know I could not speak to it. I don't know the actual process that the Farm Service Agency looks at when you're applying for a loan. I don't know if one of the questions on a loan application is, have you ever been arrested for anything like that? So again, I hate to put it to someone else, but the Farm Service Agency are the ones who could probably answer that question.
Okay.
I'll tell you from a licensing perspective, so we have hard requirements on, if an applicant has had a felony conviction for a controlled substance over the last 10 years, they cannot receive a hemp license, either from us, from a state, or from an Indian tribe. As we see some of the state level adult use programs come into place and the accompanying expungement of prior controlled substance convictions, or lessening of convictions from a felony down to a misdemeanor, that has impacted some of our applicants, because we've seen someone apply for a license and been denied because they've had a felony conviction for marijuana within the last 10 years, after their state has gone through that expungement process and that felony has gone away, then they were then able to receive a license. So that's a good story there.
Great questions. Okay, well, we are just about at an hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. How do people get in touch, or can we just go over again, where do people find the services for those that may be logged in a little bit late? How do people get in touch, find additional information from here? What do you guys recommend, or what advice would you give, like you said in the beginning, Bill, to those who are interested or looking for services?
Yeah. So again, as I mentioned to everyone, and I think my colleague Bill will agree that the expectation is, after you've listened to this great conversation we had with everybody, that somebody doesn't go into the local office and say, well, Bill Richmond told me it was 0.10 is what it was. So I don't know what you're talking about. So again, it's where the rubber meets the road. It is the local office. If you go to farmers.gov, you will find up on the top right-hand corner a connect. And in that connect, you can put in your state and your county, and it'll give you your local offices. I did notice somebody had mentioned in the chat that some of the rural developments are not there. And they did mention that you could look for the state directors, and those are normally listed below the local office of who the state directors are. So that's how any kind of information there. And then obviously, where Bill is at in AMS, if you go to USDA.gov, there's a listing of all the agencies, and you can look in there for things like that. So they may be very helpful there.
That's excellent. There is one other question here asking about, let's see, it says, what about support for basic research? Is there anyone answering questions regarding, for example, the performance of hemp varieties in different environments, the different performance of monoecious versus dioecious, so forth?
I'll tell you, one big change we made in the final rule was that for researchers, whether they're done through a university or through a third-party private research entity, they are subject to those performance-based sampling requirements, meaning that a state or a tribe can fully exempt them from sampling and testing requirements that they would have been subject to under the interim final rule. On top of that, we, through our USDA's Agricultural Research Service, are investing significant money into all kinds of genetics research. We're building a hemp germplasm research facility in upstate New York currently. So lots of money being directed at research, not so much to individual growers at this point, more to established institutions and to our land grant research partners. But I anticipate that evolving certainly here over the next few years.
Excellent. Okay, well, you guys, thank you so much for joining. Again, if you guys or anybody else on this call has questions, please reach out to them. Please clarify if you do have questions. I know that you guys have been fabulous to work with us and to help spread the word. I want to put it out there also. Our goal is to help really bridge these gaps and connect these pieces. And so if at any time either of you would like to come back, or if you have a message that we can help promote, and we've got a great group here that definitely stands behind doing things right in the industry. And so we really like to support you and however that is to move things forward. So let's stay in touch. And for everybody else on the call, if there's anything we can do at Global Hemp Association to help promote your business and move you guys along, we're definitely here to do that. I will give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Bob Moore Financing. If you guys do have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to him. I know he shared his contact information in the chat as well, but has done a fabulous job at being able to get financing for quite a few of our members and has lots of different resources thinking out of the box. So again, thank you guys very much for joining. I'd love to have you guys join as members and support what we're doing so we can continue to grow this. We had just over, like I said, 600 people log into our meetings last month. And so we're definitely growing and again, building this supply chain and connecting these dots. So thank you very, very much again, and we'll see you guys next time.
Great. Thanks, Mandi. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. You were fabulous.